Everyone, hi, my name is Chris Carnell, co-founder of Codify. And tonight we are having a webinar on what the Code Labs experience is like. We've had a few webinars the past few months leading up to this with people who have gone through the program before, people who are currently in the program, or actually the graduation was just last week, actually. And tonight we're talking to the code coaches who actually are instructors of the program, professional developers. And what we're trying to do is just give people insight into the different pathways of really learning to code. And we as an organization have a program called Code Labs, which is a pathway to learn how to become a professional developer. So we'd like to share about that with you all. And if you do have any questions as we get through this talk, feel free to post it into the chat channel, and we can ask it in Q&A after. What we try to do is about 20-30 minutes or so of just talking with the code coaches and then leaving the rest for Q&A for anybody that has any questions. So if you do have any questions while we're talking, feel free to post it in chat or feel free to ask it afterwards. That's perfectly fine. We do have another code coach that was joining us, Nolan Hovis, but unfortunately got sick this morning. So running into some great obstacles for this event, but we'll keep trucking through them. If you are interested in getting to know Will and German here, who we'll be talking to, you'll have to join the class and you'll get to know them more then. They'll definitely feel like family. So we're gonna like kind of just fast forward from their backgrounds and get just straight into the Code Labs, the actual Code Labs experience itself. But hopeful with some of the questions that I'll ask them, maybe they can tie in like their experience of how they got to where they are today compared to the Code Labs experience and what that is like. So I'm hopeful that will be helpful to you all. So I will start with you. And so Will, he entered boot camp, and if you want to share just a very brief, that's perfectly fine. But he did earlier in his career, entered a boot camp, and the experience just wasn't for him. So he dropped out and then self-taught himself how to code and started doing freelance work. And then we found him and asked him to be a code coach here at Codify. So now he does full-time. He's building software, and he is a code coach as well. So you'll notice that as a theme throughout the program is that we try to find professional developers who actually lead the program. So Will, if you want to give an intro, I'm going to ask the question, and if you want to give the intro, feel free to talk more. So someone applies to the program and they immediately get access to the platform, and it has some pre-work that we do before the actual program begins. So can you go over, what can someone expect to happen during that time? What can they expect? What are our expectations? And really what we look for people completing that pre-work.
All right. So first of all, hi, I'm Will. We talked a little bit before the meeting, some of us. I'll get into my background, I think, as we go along. So I'll just kind of answer your question at face value here first. So you apply to the program, you enter in, kind of your name, email, a little bit of your background, and you're immediately taken to the pre-work section. The reason we have this is we found that it was kind of a big jump between just someone applying to saying, hey, I'm interested in coding, and then just showing up for our program. And so we've always had some kind of pre-work, but we kind of revamped it this time. So when you are first onboarded onto the program, you are going to go through like a series of playlists or different videos to get you set up from knowing really nothing about coding or web development or things like that to kind of having a pretty solid foundation. So you'll learn the basics of the web, how the web kind of works, what are we actually doing as developers here, and then I'll take you into downloading all the tools that you're going to need for this program. And just kind of developing on your own. So we're going to show you all the download links, how you're going to walk through it, whether you're on a PC or a Mac, just to make sure that everyone's set up there. As a side note, if you do have questions on that, we're always available. We have our kind of support chat that you can just send emails to, and we'll help you out there. So after you kind of understand what we're doing, kind of the whole concept around the web, you have all the tools that you need. We'll take you through HTML, which is kind of the building block of any web page that you see. It's like the text content on a page. Then we'll move on to CSS, which stands for cascading style sheets for the nerds out there. And it's basically how we make the website look pretty. So it's how we put buttons in certain areas, or we have shadow effects or things going on throughout our web page. And then we'll move on to JavaScript, which is how you make things interactive. So if I click on a button and maybe it does some kind of thing to one page, or maybe navigation or things like that, right? So JavaScript is how we're going to make our page a little bit more interactive. So you go through kind of those core modules, and really you can do a lot with just those. Everything we go on from there is just kind of tools that make it easier to work with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So you'll learn those foundations, and at the very end, we have like a little project, I guess you can say, and it's just like a tutorial video, and we ask that you kind of go through that tutorial video and then add a little bit of your own flair afterwards, just so we know that you're not just like copy and pasting or getting code from your friend, and that you're actually kind of interested in these kind of things. So that's kind of the overview of what the pre-work actually is. Now, as for expectations, we don't expect you to master any of this stuff or to be able to know it in your sleep or have a test on it and get a passing grade on it. I mean, you'd really be amazed at how many emails I get personally saying, man, Will, I don't know. I'm not really understanding most of those things. Maybe 10% is sticking in my brain. Am I supposed to be knowing all of this stuff by the end of the pre-work? And my answer is, oh, absolutely not, right? We're going to go over all of these when you get into the program as well, but it's just to get you kind of initiated into some of these concepts, and just the vocabulary, see if you're interested in it, kind of things like that, right? You don't need to memorize this stuff. You don't need to be able to code yet on your own. That's why we're here to kind of help you develop those skills. Now, if you can, and you do want to take the extra time and come into the Code Labs experience ready to go, we can definitely help you excel. But really what we're just looking for is that you're showing up, you're trying to learn these concepts, and that you're trying your best. That's really what I got here. Is there any follow-up questions for that?
Well, I'm curious because your personal experience, you'd entered a boot camp and then you dropped out, and then, you kind of self-taught your way, and you have been a significant part of saying like, hey, here's the beginning parts of the pre-work and what we think people should learn. So I'm curious, can you contrast like why was that? Maybe it doesn't go well together if there was other reasons, but why is what we're doing with the pre-work and what you all are offering for people like a good foundational or good starting blocks to getting into computer programming?
Yeah, sure. I actually think it is a good segue. So the coding bootcamp that I went to, as with anything in life, there's varying degrees of quality, right? You can find something that's really good or something that's not so good. Unfortunately, I found one that was just not so good. I was living in an area where it wasn't like big, I guess, for tech things like that, and it was kind of a little bit ago. And so I found this, and the code coaches didn't care. Sometimes they didn't even show up. The curriculum was just, you kind of sit down and you watch videos. There was no real world projects. I couldn't really ask too many questions, and it was just kind of learning technologies that weren't relevant for what I wanted to be doing. And so I don't know if you can call it dropped out. It was in the first week I realized, okay, this is one of those low quality things. It's not for me. So that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth for boot camps, and it was also pretty expensive, somewhat as a contrast to ours. So price didn't really have anything to do with the quality aspect of that. And so that's where I left off on that journey. And then I realized, all right, there's so many free resources on YouTube. There's courses that are maybe like $10 or maybe even $100 that I could probably learn from. And I went down that route. So I know the pros and cons of both. And I do want to say that going down the self-taught route, it took me 2 years of, coding every night to get anywhere where I was making money. So that route took a long time, right? You might say a college degree, right, is 4 years and things like that. But we had these people going through boot camps, even our boot camp in 6 months, and getting a job from there. So really my whole idea or philosophy of going into this as a code coach is I would love to help people shrink down that thing of 2 years. Like, okay, I'm going to work every single night after work for 2 years, and shrink that down to maybe 6 months or 1 year of hard work. Because I get it. Like sometimes you're in a job that you just don't like. Myself, I was working manual labor for like 60 hours, just overtime all the time. I would come home exhausted, try to learn how to code, do it all over on the weekends. And just having the support system that we have here at Code Labs, and having this pre-work experience of learning the core fundamentals and then getting right into the program, it'll allow you and it'll allow us to help speed up your progress and get a job, if that's your goal, a lot faster. So the reason self-taught route is so hard is because you don't know what to learn, and you kind of get like shiny object syndrome. Like I was like, okay, maybe I should learn this because there's a video on this. And then some other YouTuber is like, no, you should learn Python, or you should learn this and you should learn that. And so I would get around just learning a whole bunch of the basics of a bunch of different languages, but I never was competent enough to build anything on my own worthwhile, or something that an employer would say, okay, they have competency in a skill. And so for me, the structure of a boot camp and what we provide is super, super valuable for anyone who kind of just wants a fast track and learn the right skills at the right time. So we spent, German and Nolan and I have spent a good amount of time kind of developing what are the actual things that you need to know to build the things that you need to build in order to get to where you want to go. So that's kind of the main philosophy of the pre-work.
Yeah, and to speak on like your point of you don't have to remember it all. The early part of the pre-work, 70% of the people that come into Code Labs have zero experience in coding. So this is their first time even getting into the program. And I think it kind of speaks to how we can take someone that, I mean, they may know how to interact with the internet. Maybe they've looked at coding stuff before, but they've never actually tried it before, and they can actually learn pretty quickly. And to Will's note on support, this is actually the first year that we're doing what we're calling crash courses. So there's one happening right now, and then there's another one that's going to start on June. I believe it's June 19th. I'll have to reconfirm on that. But it's basically, we have past Code Labs graduates are there Mondays and Thursdays for 2 weeks. And it's basically office hours from 5:30 to 8:30 in the evenings. If you have questions on HTML, if you have questions on CSS, you have questions on JavaScript, if you have questions on personal project, they're there for you. And so people can join that group, and it's pretty close to structured to how the actual program works as well. So what they'll do is they'll get on and they'll explain, hey, here's what you learned during the HTML part, do a little live coding, and then say, what are some questions that I can ask for you? And then maybe here's some exercises that you can work on if you've already watched the videos and you've already started to code and things like that. So we've tried to put some support systems in place. So people are more than welcome to go self-paced and do the pre-work themselves, but there's definitely opportunities for them to get in and get help. So German, so I did have the next question for Nolan, but Nolan is unfortunately out today. So I'm going to just jump over to German Cruz. And so German is a college dropout. So this is a pattern now. You'll see we all drop out of things around here. But he took some classes, some coding classes or algebra class, calculus classes in college, dropped out. He went to, if you all have ever heard of the organization called Flatiron, which is a coding boot camp. And I think what you'll find is, we have found, so German, Nolan, and Will aren't the only code coaches that are available. They do work at Codify full time now, and then so they're software developers and then code coaches as well. But we also go within the region, so across Southern Missouri, and find other professional software developers to help lead the program, because we think that's pretty important for relevancy. So most of those people have gone through very similar paths of they've gone through a boot camp, or some of them have gone through Code Labs and now they're professional developers and now they want to come back and be a code coach to kind of pay it forward. So you'll get insight. These people know the experience that you're going through if this is the route that you want to take. So German, maybe, again, kind of if you want to contrast kind of your background to what's going on, maybe you could talk about so we get in, you do the pre-work, we have selections into the program, and the selections, what we look for, again, as Will mentioned, we just look to see is like, hey, did you put some effort into the pre-work? We look for, is this something you're really interested in doing? Because we want to pour ourselves into you and help you be successful. And so we want to bring as many people into the program that we can. And so we bring that in, and then the program officially starts in August. And what we do is we start into the front end. So the front, what you see on the screen. So German, maybe you could talk about, what do we do in the front end section of the program? And that is from August to December. That we spend on that section. Maybe if you want to go to get as detailed as the languages we learn or the concepts that are taught. And then even if you want to talk about even the details like the sessions themselves. So we have both in-person and virtual sessions to maybe talk about what people can expect.
Yeah, so my name is German Cruz. To pronounce my first name, it's actually Hedemann, but you can call me German. That's totally fine in itself. Yeah, so really apologize that Nolan couldn't be here. I think I got him sick. I was sick these past couple of weeks with this. I still have this cough, so I apologize if I cough while I'm talking here. But yeah, so to kick off really my background, I am a college dropout. I've spent a couple of years in college and such. And I found out that, I really enjoyed programming, but after leaving college, I ended up pursuing web development in the self-taught route. So really, I'd just been through the three adventures, like college or self-taught for a year, or even going into a boot camp like Flatiron School, which is somewhat similar to Codify's code labs here, but not necessarily and such. And we can talk about the differences here in a bit. But really, the start of the cohort is the first half of Code Labs is the front end development portion and such. So this focuses primarily on app development, custom software development, which specifies into web development specifically. So the first month is primarily JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, building single page applications with that and such, and then diving into a web framework, front end framework called Angular and such. Has anyone heard of Angular here? Maybe React or Vue.js, maybe other sort of frameworks and such. Primarily what Code Labs is geared for is when you are comfortable with one language, it's very easy for you to transition into another language and such. And you'll find yourself going into that when attending the boot camp and such. But Angular really focuses on these, I call it a tool shed because it offers a wide variety of tools for you to create such complex UI apps and such. But that's primarily it. I can go over the concepts in a brief overview, but that's going to take an entire 4 months there. But back to you there, Chris.
So maybe you could walk through like what the actual, so once we actually start the program, what happens during the actual session? So we have sessions twice a week and we have different options. So there's 2 virtual cohorts. So one is 12:30 to 3:30. One is 5:30 to 8:30. They're both Mondays and Thursdays. And then we have in-person sessions as well, Cape Girardeau, Springfield, and Southwest Missouri. So we're kind of trying to meet people where they are. If they can come in person, that's great. Or if they can only do virtual, then that's an option for them as well. But maybe you could talk about once someone is in the class, what is that for that 3 hours or for that 6 hours of the week? What is being done?
Yeah, so in these sessions here, primarily, we spend about 3 hours, right? And the first phase of these 3 hours here essentially is some live coding by the instructor and such. This is really a good opportunity for students to ask any sort of questions and things of that nature. So that's around maybe about 30 minutes or so until we get into exercises or really group exercises and such, or even work on projects and such. So that's really the remainder of the 3 hours, which we can allow code coaches to give you code reviews or feedbacks and such. I like to personally give one-on-ones to each student, kind of going over their code, giving them feedback and kind of suggesting any additional implementation to their code and such. I like to kind of go back to what Will has said. When you're really self-taught or maybe even going through a program specifically, we try to really harness that, bring that 2 years of just working that development to like 1 year, right? And just fast learning and such. So that's pretty much the gist of these 3 hours, necessarily in person, but in a virtual environment, you can see yourself breaking into different breakout rooms into with other students and such, as well as being led by a code coach.
Chris, you want to talk about the flipped classroom model?
Yeah, so the way we've looked at, so the reason Code Labs even came about is because Codify is actually, if you want to give it a kind of overview, it's a tech-based economic development organization. So we have more than just Code Labs. We have other programs that support startups, entrepreneurs, co-working space, and then the talent side, so training, education, and training as well. And so when we have been helping startups and tech companies throughout the years, and in our early days, really a lot of people were coming to us asking us for developers. They were needing talent and we couldn't find any. So we knew that it was a problem here, and we did some research and found that our region is actually one of the worst when it comes to number of percentage of the workforce that is made up of developers. And so we saw that as both a problem and an opportunity of, we have a chance to bring skills and opportunities to people that may have never had exposure to them, or an opportunity to learn the skills. So we looked at a bunch of different learning models. So you look at, it's kind of a spectrum. You look on the self-paced, like massive online courses. So MOOCs is what they're called, and it's self-paced. So that's like the Udemy's, that's like Khan Academy, stuff like that. So you can just go find stuff. It's everything from free to, $10 to $100 that you can take and you can go through it. Most of them are self-paced, but it's dependent on you to figure out what different, as Will mentioned, what different tools should you go learn. And then on the very other end of the spectrum, there's a college degree. So that's very structured. There's a high cost associated with it when you start to get into the higher, past bachelor's degree. And so within the past decade or so, boot camps really started to pop up, which really kind of sits in the middle. And what they have done, they've tried to speed up that process of learning. And so we looked at all of those different learning environments and tried to pick best principles from them. And so what we do is what's called a flipped classroom model. So what we do is we have set curriculum that's there for the entire program. And so what someone will do is, let's say that Monday night, we're going to be going, it's an intro to HTML. Let's just say that's the topic for the night. What someone will do is you'll need to watch videos and do the coding for that piece before that Monday evening. And then you come to the class. And what happens is the code coaches then do the live coding sessions to say, hey, here's what you learned, just learned yourself. And then now let's get into, and they'll answer questions that they may have. And in that session, they can live code. So if someone says, hey, I couldn't figure this, I was banging my head against this certain problem, they can walk through and code through and say, hey, here's how we would try to solve that problem. At the end of the day, it's not necessarily the language. There is some extent that's important, but at the end of the day, the most important thing I think you will learn through Code Labs is the ability to learn or how to problem solve. So they'll work through, like, as a developer, here are the different things I do when I come across a problem to try to find that answer. So we'll do that. So that's called a flipped classroom model. And then I had mentioned that we have professional developers. So these aren't people who are retired that haven't been in the industry for very long at all. I mean, these are people, their full-time jobs are developers. So they're giving their time in the evenings, and they can say, hey, I worked on this today. This very thing that you're learning today, I worked on this feature today, and this is how I did it. So it's very practical. We've tried to strip away as much theoretical things as possible to make it very practical. And we've also integrated it, and we've continued to refine it. We've been doing Code Lab since 2017, and no one cohort has ever looked exactly the same, because each time we refine it to try to get it closer and closer to what a real world work environment looks like. So I think there's common myths of one common myth with, as a developer, you're someone sitting in their basement, or they're alone and they're just coding. And that's not true. Coding is a very collaborative process. It involves a lot of people, not just coders, but involves designers, product owners, business analysts, and involves a lot of different people. And so we make sure that people get the chance to figure out how to work together, not just that soft skill part, but also the technical part of it as well. So the tools that you're actually using. So there are some schools out there where basically you learn in the browser. Like you just sit here and you look at your screen and you code right there. Well, that's not how it's actually done in the real world. You're using text editors, using things like GitHub, you're using things to deploy applications, and we use those tools to teach someone. So that way, by the time you're done with the program and you get a job, you're not sitting there that first day and being introduced to all these new tools that you've never even used before. But you can be productive on day one and know that you're going to be able to be of value to the company and be fulfilling and say that, hey, I'm contributing to what this team is doing. So that's really kind of the model of the program. And then we'll talk about this a little bit more, but then it's also been very community focused as well. So we get feedback from not only the participants in the program on like pace and how things have been done and the different support that they need, but also from the code coaches themselves on what they've seen from the students, and then employers. So we get a bunch of feedback from employers who have hired individuals from Code Labs or are looking to hire people from Code Labs. And at the very end of the program, there's actually an employer-led capstone project. So local employers come in and they lead a project with individuals. And so that's a chance really for people to see, here's what it's like to be a professional developer. So by that time, you will have built from the front end to the back end, you will have built multiple applications that you can show, hey, I actually built this thing. And then you will have experience of working with an employer. And so what we've seen a lot of times is people who work in those capstone projects with employers, they actually get hired by some of those employers. So it's a network thing then as well. You start to, the employer says, hey, this person is just now learning and they've just gone through this program, but over the past month, I've seen their learning do this. And it makes me more confident in hiring them because I see that they're just going to continue to get better. And so we want them as a part of our team. So we've tried to make it, yeah, again, very just the best practices of the way that we think we can shorten the amount of time it takes for you to be a high quality, effective software developer. So we do the first few months from August, December, we spend in the front end. And again, that's mainly on what you see here. And then the next few months, if you complete the front end section, there's not grades or anything we give like that. It's, if you're putting in the effort and we see that you're continuing to learn, you're showing up to the programs and the sessions. If you complete the front end, you're automatically enrolled into the back end and you can come into the back end part of the program. And that is from January through April. So I'll kick it over to either Will or German. Feel free to talk about that. But maybe if you similar to how you talked about the front end and the different things that they were learning, maybe you can talk about the different things that are taught in the back end part of the program, whether it be languages or maybe it be concepts that they're learning and that they can take away and know that they'll have the skills from during that back end piece of the program.
Jeremy, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. If I can give you an analogy of like an overview of the program in itself, you can think of it as like a restaurant. You have customers as well as waiters and cooks. So like your customers are like your front end piece. And when I say front end piece, I'm really thinking about a web page, right? With buttons, text, interconnectivity. You can almost think of it like Facebook, where you're creating a post, things of that nature, right? Being able to follow individuals. So customers are your front end piece. And when you want to, let's say, for example, navigate to someone's profile, you actually need someone to get that information. And this is your waiter, essentially. So, when the waiter asks you, what do you want? The customer says, I want I want to navigate to someone's profile and see all of their information. So what ends up happening is the waiter, also referred to as the API or the backend essentially, or these rules and such, the waiter goes back to the kitchen and tells the cook, hey, I want to gather this information. And so that is essentially your database. So when it comes to a backend, that second half of Code Labs, you're essentially creating what is called a web API, or also referred to as a server API, which essentially allows you to get information, store information, remove information, or even update information, stuff like that. Okay. So, when the waiter gets this information, it brings it back to the customer, and now the customer can see that user's information and such. So that's pretty much an analogy when it comes to a full stack program like Code Labs. And that backend is essentially creating that communication between the database and sending that back to the front end application. There are other core specific concepts which we'll get into, like being able to email, things like that, or being able to hide secret information so it's not a security vulnerability in order for you to interact with third-party services and such. Will, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, just to summarize, the front end portion that we'll spend the first 6 months on is just everything that you care about as a user. So any website that you go on, how are you interacting with it? And the back end is basically everything that the developer needs to do in order to make that reliable and secure. So, I mean, it's not things that the user will end up seeing or noticing or even knowing that it's going on, but it's super, super valuable, and it just makes you a more well-rounded and complete developer.
Yeah, and so there's our objective with that 10-month span is that you get exposure to what is front-end development, what is back-end development, and you can actually build an application yourself from scratch. You can. And so what some people will do is they're mainly interested in the front end. And so they want to go deeper and they just want to be a front end developer. But with that experience, they now know what's happening on the back end, and it makes them a better front end developer because they know what's happening. And then likewise, some people like back end development, architecture, and everything like that. But knowing what's going on in the front end and how they need to serve them that information, they get insight into what that is actually like. And so we want to just make sure we give people just enough information that they know what's happening within building an application as an application is running and everything, so that they can continue into their career. Typically, it does take getting into the industry and into a job for you to start to be exposed to other things, to really start to figure out what you do enjoy doing. Just the more projects you build, you'll start to figure out, I like this piece of it. And honestly, computer programming, I mean, the things that we're teaching are web application development, but there are so many other jobs involved with it within the tech space that just knowing how coding works gives you a big advantage. So things like being a business analyst, things like being a project manager or a product manager, quality assurance person, someone that's maybe testing the applications to say, hey, here's a bug, this doesn't work, or it should work this way. There's so many different things that are within the tech ecosystem that are helpful for that. And so we've had people come to the program and then they say, hey, I just wanted to figure out, I wanted to learn what coding was, but my end goal is I want to be a project manager, but it'd be beneficial for me to know how the coding works. And we're actually working with some partners right now about adding additional tracks to Code Labs. So things like quality assurance, cybersecurity. We're in partnership with the Missouri Cybersecurity Center on Excellence and QA, and we'll be looking to add those kind of additional skills that you could learn if you'd like to take those pathways.
And I think the cool thing is, like Chris mentioned earlier, is that we're not just like a coding bootcamp. Like that's just kind of one piece of what we do. And so Jeremy and myself and Chris, we all know people that do all these other roles. And so we've had students who are interested in, let's say QA, and we can point them in the right direction. And so we'll kind of get in contact with all the people that we know and say, okay, this person's interested in this. These are their skill sets. This is what they've been going through in the program. How would you advise them to move forward into that role? Like, what are some resources? And so it's just about getting on the right track with the right people. And then from there, you can branch out and we'll help you kind of do all of that. So.
And probably the last thing I would add before you, and then like the kind of cap of the program is the commitment that we've seen people dedicate to the program that are successful. So we've tried to make the program accessible. So it's not this part-time, it's not completely part-time and self-paced where it could linger for, as we'll mention, 2+ years before you're really getting up and going. But it's not something that, a lot of the people within the program, they have families, they have jobs, some of them have multiple jobs, and they can't just stop doing that to learn how to code. So it is part-time, but what we've seen people who've been successful, who have gone through the program and then have gotten jobs most quickly, they spend at least 20 hours a week on the program. So you're spending 6 a week inside or in sessions with the code coaches, and then 20 total of outside the classroom, you're doing additional coding exercises. So what people will usually do is they'll put a schedule in place. And so, 2 to 3 hours a day, I'll dedicate to doing these exercises and just get in the habit of learning these different things and going deeper on some of the concepts that they're learning. So that's what we've seen, and obviously encourage people to do that. And so it's not a complete stop everything you're doing to do this, but it is a commitment. And I'll quote Patrick Oswald, is probably one of my favorite graduates from Paducah, and he says, it was a sacrifice at the time, but I knew that at the end of it, it was worth it. I had kind of this gold bucket at the end, and I knew if I did dedicate my time to this, that it would be worthwhile. And he did. He was working at a marina, working on boats, and then now he's a professional software developer. And so at the end of the program, we work with local employers. So Southeast Missouri, Southern, Southwest Missouri, we get local employers involved. And what we do at that point is we work with them to identify what are some projects that participants could build within a month. And then you actually get to go through mock interviews with those employers. And so we'll set those up before the capstone project. But what we're looking to do there is give you experience into what that sort of looks like. So by the time you do start to really go through the interview process, it's not the first time you've ever gone through it. So you have some experience into what the employers are, some of the questions that they ask, some of the people that they have at the table, and things like that. And then so we get into the employer capstone projects. At this time, Code Labs and the code coaches really start to become a more supportive role, and it's actually led by the companies. So they typically have their CTOs, there's been founders, senior developers, they're leading the projects and they're there. So you're getting an insight into their culture, how they work, the other tools that they're using, and everything like that. So maybe Will or German, if you want to jump in and talk about your experience of what you've seen, maybe some examples of like capstone projects you've seen built in the past that have done well, what people have liked about that part of the program, are really open-ended to whatever you'd like to share.
Yeah, so the capstone project is hands down everyone's favorite part of it. And I see why. I mean, you're literally working with real companies that want to kind of hire you temporarily as a developer, and they get to see you progress. So like Chris said, if you put in extra time and energy during that section of it, and the employer can notice something like that, you're just kind of fast-tracked onto, maybe their company, or word gets around in Missouri in general. And so they can kind of hire you to another company and say, hey, we work with this person. We're not kind of looking for someone right now, but it's definitely a good person to go after. So everyone loves the employer projects. It is a month long of a bunch of different ideas, right? So we've had people do like dashboards for, like walking for a cause, things like that, where you can like track steps, and kind of things along that nature. Or man, we've done a lot of quite a bit of different dashboards for different projects. We've done like front end things for like Uptown Jackson, so where you can kind of navigate or add buildings, a lot of different types of things. German, what are some other ideas that you guys have done for capstone projects? They're kind of all over the board, honestly. It's whatever the employer decides that they need. And a lot of these are production facing. So it might be something that like website tweaks for a marketing page or things like that. So anything that actually is like real world that you can kind of show potential. You can put it on your resume, you can put it on your portfolio as like, hey, I built this thing for this company and it kind of did this, right? That's what everyone wants to look for. So employer projects are just a good time in general.
Yeah, to kind of add on to that, you have these group of individuals spending 8 months, and you get to this point where they're divided into groups, right? And now throughout this specific month, you have, these groups who already have friendships, right? That has been developed over the course of the year, and everyone's super excited to interact with employers and such. And everyone's just, I mean, this is a great month overall. It's really the last standing of Code Labs, our last hurrah here. And really capstone projects, it just depends on the employer. Specifically, a capstone project can be an implementation that's worked on by a group to an existing project, or it can be a prototype. An example of a capstone project that I oversaw was a project in Paducah, which they built a employee-only dashboard for bankers. And essentially what that dashboard was about was pretty much gathering customer information on this dashboard and be able to create what they call interventions or interventions there, which are essentially just appointments and such. And so throughout that month, it's just a lot of it's kind of like going back and forth, like, hey, how do I, what is this? What's the terminology for this? And really understanding what the project scope is. And it's just great to see everyone like work together as a team and really be able to create just a great dynamic overall in the program there. It's great to see.
And I'm not sure if we do this every year, but what we did this previous year is we kind of had a list of all the employers' kind of projects, not what the employer was, but kind of a description of what you'll be building. And we had you guys kind of be able to vote on which ones that you'd like to do. So it does give you some agency in maybe that you want to go into more enterprise or banking software, and we have a nice employer project for that. You can join that company's employer project part of it. So it's not just like, hey, we're just going to throw you in a random group and we hope it works out for you. We really like to tailor it to you as an individual, how you've gone through the program, where you want to be, and then also what the employer is looking for, what type of people that they want involved. So I think all in all, it's a good experience for everyone involved.
Yeah, my favorite one that they just wrapped up just last week was a company called Hero Technologies out of Springfield that work with people with disabilities, and they have tablets in the individuals' homes that they can communicate with people as they need things. And so the group actually built a chat-based system. So right now it's like you'd press it and you'd have to wait for a call or something, but they actually built a chat-based system that integrates with their platform, that the person with a disability can now talk to someone one-on-one and not have to wait for someone to respond. And another company built, it's called a CI/CD pipeline, but it's basically how you view how software is pushed out into the real world. And then the CTO of the company is a big Star Wars fan. So at the night of the demo, they surprised him that when a deploy fails, there's actually a Star Wars, the hyperdrive failure sound goes down. And so it was this blaring noises of, and so he was pretty tickled with that. So as Will mentioned, yeah, it's by far the most enjoyable piece of the program. And working in groups, there's actually been, so boot camps are relatively new, or this learning style is relatively new. What we like to say is that we're further than a boot camp, because we're not just teaching you syntax and we're not just trying to rush you out, but we're trying to give you the actual skills that you can start into a job and be successful at it. And so there's been some studies in this, and there's been a white paper come out recently with a doctor from an organization called Digital Promise, which does educational research. And they found within this type of learning environment that the highest correlation of people that, or the highest trait correlation that is correlated with people who stick with it and continue learning, but then also their ability to grasp these new concepts that they're learning, there's even less of a correlation of the amount of time they spend and more correlation with the number of people they engage with. And so being in this group setting where you're not just learning by your own is really important. And so you're getting different perspectives. You're seeing how people learn different problems. At times you're teaching, you're showing people, hey, here's how I solved that problem. And so it's a really good chance for people. And now there's starting to be science to show like, yes, this is the best way to learn this type of skill set. So I have just a couple more questions, and then I'll open up to Q&A. Again, if you have any questions, post it in the chat, or feel free to answer it when we wrap up here. But there are so many different ways to learn. So there are the MOOCs, there are the self-paced route, and then there's the boot camps. There's all the way to getting a college degree. Could you all talk about, why code labs? Why would you all say code labs is a good route, or who is an ideal person that code labs is for? And maybe on top of that, as code coaches yourselves, like, what do you offer? What would you provide to someone that enters this program?
Sure. Well, I can try to answer some of those. It's quite a few questions there, but so why code labs? Man, I wish I could put that in a few simple words. Honestly, from seeing all these other boot camps and being in some myself, to going the self-tried route, and then teaching at Codify, and also teaching at other coding boot camps before this. It's crazy that this is free. I can't stress that enough. Like, that is worth so much more than these other boot camps charging 10, 12K, and we give it to you for free. So the quality of it is just unparalleled. We have code coaches who are so dedicated to you guys. Like, we will go above and beyond to get you to where you want to go, as long as you show us that you're committed and you want to put in the work. Like, as long as you're doing that, we're all for you. We're all big-hearted people, and we want to see you succeed. I want you to do it faster than I've ever done it. I want every single cohort like every single cohort into the future. I want it to be better than the last one. And so we're kind of always dedicated to constantly improving, getting your guys' feedback, making sure that everyone's happy and impressed. So you have all that support from the code coaches. You have the curriculum that we've refined over the past couple of years, and it's kind of working with local employers and seeing, hey, what kind of technologies do you work with? What do you want people to see going into going into the workforce? Like, what technologies do they need to have familiarity with? How do you work with teams? And so we kind of have the employer side on lockdown. We're teaching you the right things at the right times to ensure that transition is smooth. We have the ecosystem of entrepreneurs and all these other different job roles that you can go into. It just kind of if you're going in person, you have access to all those people and those networks, right? We'll allow you into the building, and you can just naturally fall into conversations with people from all these different companies. So, I mean, it's really just the environment, it's the code coaches, it's the family environment of being with other people who are learning the same thing, who are excited about learning it, and spending a year together kind of doing this thing, right? At the end of it, we have this awesome ceremony where everyone just has so much gratitude, and they feel so close to each other after that full year of going through it all. And then it doesn't stop there either. Like, I still have group messages from cohorts 2 years ago, and then even the one that just ended, it's popping in there in the Slack channel. People are always posting things, or asking questions, or sharing what they're working on. And so it's not something that you just come in, you do your work, you don't talk to anybody, and then you go out of the program, and maybe you get a job, maybe you don't. Like, we're really here along the whole journey to make sure you are getting what you want out of the program. So I guess it's kind of my selling point. It's maybe I'm a little bit biased, kind of a code coach here, but Jeremy, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think I'm very happy to be able to wake up every day and really help improve really the tech community across Southern Missouri. I think what you have here in this program is a group of individuals, code coaches, who are very passionate of what they do here, and we're really happy to pass out our knowledge to individuals of the program here. And what I enjoy mostly is just having the ability to make a world-class program along with the other code coaches and such. So all in all, it's very fun, and I'm very passionate in what I do specifically, and I'm ready to have lots of fun this next go around here.
Oh, I think you're muted.
Thanks for sharing, guys. I have one more question, and I'll open it up. What has helped you as a developer learn quickly or better? And then what have you seen people who have been successful in the program? What are some of the characteristics or traits that you've seen that they've had?
I think as we go, Jeremy, you had something to say? You want to take this one?
Oh no, you got it. Will.
I think we'll get into like how we think as developers as the program kind of progresses, because it's not something that I can really distill in one kind of nugget there. But what I have seen from people who are successful going through the program, that is very, very obvious to me. And it's actually pretty straightforward. So the people that we see who are successful in this program, right, they kind of have two main traits, right? The first one is that they have perseverance, that they don't quit, that they show up every single day, whether they want to or not, right? Everyone has life events, everyone has things going on, everyone has excuses on why they can't code today or the next day or why they can't show up to class. But the people who are successful consistently put in time. So it doesn't mean that you have to, like, Chris said, sell out your whole life and only do this. You can, right? And it works well, but you don't have to. But you do need to be consistent, right? So that's kind of the first one. And then the second big one that I always see is ask questions, right? It's people who are willing to be curious, who are willing to maybe look stupid, where you don't, but kind of feel like you look stupid by asking a question that seems simple, willing to be wrong, things along that vein. It's just people who show up to class every single day and they ask questions, even if it makes them look silly, right? All the technical knowledge will be learned through those two traits. You need to put in the work, right? You've heard this a million times. You need to put in the work, and then you need to be able to mine the right information from these sources like the code coaches or even your fellow peers. So I've really found that those two are the main two traits, and everything else after that can be learned, right? As like supplementary ones, yeah, you need to be able to work on a team, right? If you're kind of not a very nice person, I'm probably not going to want to help you very much. So, I mean, most of the people, we kind of weed that out during the interview process. So I don't think that's an issue for anyone here. But as long as you're kind of a good-natured person, you put in the work and you ask questions, we'll get you to where you want to go.
Yeah, I think consistency as well as working hard, not giving up, being very patient. I think what really made me a successful developer coming up was just my patience and my passion for being able to solve, coding challenges and such, or developing projects. I didn't really treat it like a 9 to 5. Like I didn't, wake up and say on the weekends, like, I'm done at 5 o'clock. I just treat it as a like a big hobby that I really want to make full time eventually. That's kind of like the biggest thing I kind of echo to students is just enjoy the process and be very patient, work hard. And as you're going through these challenges, just rely on your peers and your code coaches, and we'll be there for you.
Yeah, that's actually a super good point, like the patience part of it. I think in my own language, I would say like the ability to delay gratification, like to be able to, on the small term or the long term. Like if you have a problem, that is a trait that you need to have is the enjoyment of solving problems, because you'll get frustrated a lot. And so you need that kind of micro patience of like, all right, this isn't working right now. I've Googled things. I've, tried talking to my rubber duck. We'll get into what that means later. I've asked the code coaches, you need to be able to be patient and be like, all right, I will solve this problem. I don't need to say, I don't know anything about coding. Just need to kind of stick on that track and eventually it'll solve. And then on the macro scale, you need to be like, I am making progress. Congratulate yourself on the little wins. Okay, I wasn't able to build this project. I didn't even know what this concept was a month ago. At least I know what that is. So I am moving forward. And so it's the ability to delay gratification by realizing that you're learning a whole bunch, right? Even if it seems like sometimes it's plateauing, there will be another jump as long as you, right, are consistent and you put in the work and you ask questions. So I do really like that thing that you added there.
Guys, thanks for sharing that. I'll open up if anybody has any questions for these guys about them, about maybe if you have any questions of what you're doing, any questions about the program, happy to answer. You all gave all the information that was
I
needed.
know. We did great. You know, I even ended with the way to be successful is to ask questions. So, you know, I'm just kidding. Sometimes it was a kind of a long talk. We went over a lot. I'm sure you're just parsing over and trying to download most of this information that we have. So it looks like Anna posted a question in the chat. She said, for people with a learning disability, are we willing to work with them? I'm going to go right off the bat and say absolutely, right? We help people from all walks of life, as long as they're willing to kind of have those traits, as long as they're willing to put in the work and want to learn. I don't see any issue with that at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, I mean, there may be ideal characteristics of the things that German and Will just mentioned of people that have been successful, but other than that, there's not an ideal person in terms of like race, creed, gender, background, anything like that. As long as you have the aptitude to do it, you can. I mean, legitimately just got an email just a couple weeks ago of a young kid who is pretty inspiring. He was actually born in, I believe it was Vietnam or Korea, with no arms or no legs, and he's growing through life, and he's taken on the challenge. He actually can play the drums. They've actually built a way for him to like play the drums, and so he's been a wrestler, and so he's just getting out of high school, and then he came across Code Labs, and he's like, can I learn how to code? And so we will do anything to help people that have the aptitude and have the motivation to want to get in this industry. You'll find that across the board with Codify as an organization, and with any code coaches that you bring in, they really do pour their heart out to people no matter where they're at in life.
And it kind of, most of the times, those people kind of do better. Like they know that they need to put in extra work, and you know, when we see that, we do want to help you out more. So it wasn't at this coding bootcamp, but the one I taught prior, there was someone who was completely blind, couldn't see, wanted to learn how to code. We're like, okay, we got to figure out how we can do this, right? And so we set up something called a screen reader for them. And so like it kind of read out the code that they were typing, or when they would go on a website, it would read out the information to them. And he did great. You know, it was a little bit unorthodox the way they need to learn, but as long as you're willing to put in that time, I think it's all good to go for you. So learning disabilities is no problem at all. Any other questions?
I've got a question.
Mhm.
So throughout the course, is everything a group project, or is everybody kind of working on their own little side project
Yeah.
as we like learn our lessons?
Yeah, I mean that's actually a really good question. So what we typically do is we'll have like 1 month, maybe we're learning a specific topic, whether it's like HTML or CSS or JavaScript, or maybe 2 weeks. Anyway, we have like a block of time dedicated to learning a technology, and then when you come to class, after you've watched the videos for that lesson or that topic, we've watched the introduction to HTML, you come to class, we're going to live code something very similar to what you just learned. As we go through that live coding, you're going to ask questions. You're like, oh, I didn't understand this. Can you go over that a little bit more in depth? After we finish the live coding, we have time where you work on sometimes individual exercises based on what you just learned, sometimes like pair programming where you work with someone else, and you kind of go over those exercises. And then when you finish like a full module, like let's say you finished HTML and CSS in our course, we typically have like a little project for you, and that'll maybe be a week, 2 weeks, sometimes a month. Sometimes they're solo projects, and sometimes they are group projects. So we like to kind of vary the way that you're learning, just to make sure that you can code things on your own, you can code things on a team, you can do exercises by yourself or with other people. So we kind of have a wide variety. Anyone else? Are we all good to go?
Yeah, well, thank you all for joining. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties, but I'm glad we had this recorded. I think you all shared some great information, so I'll definitely get this out to those who weren't able to make it. And if there are any questions that come from that, I'll make sure to get that to you all. So just as a reminder, I mean, we are accepting applications right now. And we do have the next what's called a crash course that begins June 19th. So you can join that if you need additional help. If you want to jump on, have office hours with past Code Labs graduates, they're more than happy to help do that. And then obviously, if you all know of anybody that you think would benefit from a program like this, we welcome you sharing it with them, because we're, as Nolan mentioned, or as Will mentioned, sorry, the program, we're very fortunate that we're able to provide it at no cost. We give full ride scholarships to everyone we bring into the program, but that absolutely does not speak to the quality of it. It's a very high quality program, rigorous at times, but worth it. And so we'd like to help as many people as we possibly can. So thank you everyone for joining tonight. Jeremy, Will, thank you so much for sharing your time and your experiences. And if you all need anything in the meantime, absolutely feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thank you all for joining.
Nice to meet you all.